But that was one of the creative things that was happening. I was working on another project in Newark, right near the Prudential Center, and there the idea was to bring in the property owners and give them a percentage of the new entity that would do the development. Now, keep in mind, you guys are appraisers, you know what the reality of the marketplace is. Builders take a risk. The municipality doesn't want to take the risk. But if the market collapses, the builder takes that risk. And when you're talking about fair compensation, if I have a property that's worth X and I'm bought out, I'm done. In some cases, I've got enough money to relocate comfortably. In some cases, maybe I don't. But in some of the projects I was aware of, the developers were saying, we'll give you a percentage based on what we think the value of your property is. We'll negotiate that percentage. We'll bring you into the partnership. You're not going to be making controlling decisions, but you'll have a percentage interest in it. And in some cases, the developers were even saying, we'll protect you on the downside. So the marketplace was evolving, and then for 5 years, nothing happened. Going back to this, interestingly, Justice Douglas was the judge that decided Euclid v. Amber, which was one of the first zoning cases, and Justice Douglas was very concerned about neighborhoods. So he said aesthetics, not just health and welfare, is a legitimate public interest. Once it is determined that taking is for a public purpose, it is for the legislature, not the court, to determine the amount and character of land to be taken. Private property may be transferred to private parties because the likelihood is that the public sector does not have the means or expertise necessary to effectuate redevelopment, and the constitutional rights of property owners whose land is taken by eminent domain are satisfied by payment of just compensation. Of course, you guys are all about just compensation. But that's what the court said. As long as people are entitled to just compensation, and you can dispute what just compensation is, that the property owners were protected. Inherent safeguards. Market reality. This struck me when, as Nina mentioned, I teach a course in redevelopment law at Rutgers Law School. And I started teaching that course probably around 2003 or 2004. And I was reading the briefs filed by the Institute for Justice before the U.S. Supreme Court on the Kelo case. And one of their arguments was that the standard for redevelopment in Connecticut was so low that arguably Georgetown could be redeveloped. Georgetown is a little piece of Washington, D.C. If you've never been there, it has and continues to be an incredibly rich portion of Washington, D.C. A lot of townhouses, a yucca-friendly community, but a vital community. And reflecting on that, it occurred to me, the economics wouldn't work for redevelopment of Georgetown. No one would take those risks. Political concerns and political reality. No political figures would stick their neck out to say we should do that. You do have judicial review. And eminent domain is a tool of last resort. Now, on the eminent domain sensitivity training issue, Kelo is valuable for that. If you think about government, government has the power to execute people. New Jersey chose not to retain that power, at least not for the time being. It has the power to incarcerate people, and it has the power to take people's property. Local government in New Jersey only has one of those powers, and that is the power of eminent domain. And it is a significant power, and one of my favorite partners, the firm is Greenbaum, Rose Smith & Davis. Arthur Greenbaum is my favorite partner. He's 87, he's a World War II veteran. He was representing a small property owner that had an interest where about the 40-yard line was an old Giant stadium. It was a commercial business, and all of the property owners, there was no question that it was a public purpose, but all of the property owners would be before a particular judge on a routine basis, discussing the takings, when people would be asked to leave their homes or their businesses. And there was one woman who continuously argued with the judge, and the judge was offended by it. And at some point she said to the judge, over my dead body, go take my home. And the judge was offended by it and said, you know, if you continue that position, I will hold you in contempt. And when the sheriffs came to the woman's house, she took out a gun and shot herself and killed herself. And my partner says that there's no question that in his mind, the judge was never the same after that. I think that's a little bit like too engaged in your property. Your property is property, life is life, but obviously she kind of meant it to do. So I do have a keen awareness from that anecdote and that story that eminent domain is a significant power. But there's a remedy for it. There is just compensation. And hey, you guys get to work and figure out what that just compensation is. So, continuing. This is kind of burdensome, but interestingly, New Jersey has a specific constitutional provision that contemplates the need and use of eminent domain for redevelopment purposes. And again, going back to the idea that New Jersey is the most densely populated state, it needs redevelopment to drive the economic engine. New Jersey Supreme Court has decided 5 cases on redevelopment. Between 1952 and 1973, it decided 4 cases. Between 1973 and 2007, it hadn't decided any cases. New Jersey Supreme Court is our highest Supreme Court. And it was presented by a litigant in Paulsboro, New Jersey. Anybody know where Paulsboro, New Jersey is? Paulsboro is just south of Camden. Camden is just directly across the Delaware River from Philadelphia. And Paulsboro actually is directly across the river from Philadelphia International Airport. Paulsboro was a major industrial manufacturing center, and that changed. It had a major refinery which closed. It had a major chemical manufacturing facility which also closed. And in that context, the New Jersey Supreme Court was faced with a challenge over the taking of some wetlands near that property. It was a seminal case in New Jersey. I have the privilege of arguing on behalf of some of the parties in that case before the New Jersey Supreme Court. And New Jersey, I think, has a great need for redevelopment of eminent domain. The unanimous court in New Jersey said yes, but. So this is what the court said. The decision sustains the constitutionality of redevelopment. The New Jersey constitutional provision that I just showed you, but I didn't ask you to read, and I don't want you to read, says that it's both a grant and power and a limitation on the municipality's power to effectuate redevelopment. This gets very obscure, but the Supreme Court said that the designation of redevelopment area, as the court spoke about in 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court spoke about it, is really a judgment for the local government to undertake. And that there is what's called a presumption of validity, and I will burden you with that, what that means. Well, actually, you're appraisers, so you know that you go into court and the assessment is presumed valid. So absent proof that it isn't valid, it's invalid. It's valid. Well, the same idea. If a municipality designates an area in need of redevelopment, that is presumed valid unless there is substantial proofs brought forward to show that it isn't. And you guys know Bridgewater Commons Mall? That's the product of the last redevelopment decision by the New Jersey Supreme Court. There were there were 2 major property owners. For people who aren't from this area, Bridgewater is just outside of Somerville. Somerville is a county seat of one of our 21 counties. Bridgewater was largely a farming area. It's been largely developed with suburban tract housing. But there was a major tract of land that was essentially surrounded by 287, which is the interstate, State Highway 202, State Highway 206, State Highway 22, and had tremendous development potential. 2 major property owners owned the bulk of those properties for decades and were never able to get together on how it should be developed. It really couldn't be practically farmed because of the constraints by the highways. And the municipality made a judgment that it ought to be redeveloped. And the Supreme Court, interestingly, there are 7 justices on the New Jersey Supreme Court. In a 3-2 decision, the New Jersey Supreme Court decided that, indeed, redevelopment did apply, and the municipality had the power to create a redevelopment structure. And the people who are from New Jersey, central New Jersey, know that there is now a major regional mall called Bridgewater Commons Mall on that site. Village of South Orange Township, I won't burden you with that, unless anybody's interested. The court continues the principle that property is not in and of themselves blighted, may be included. This goes back to the Berman norm. If necessary for rehabilitation of a large blighted area, don't worry about that because that's just an obscure point that a certain standard for declaration of a need for redevelopment was modified by the court.